Can you separate a crown from a king? Every night he sleeps without his crown on his head. So if you can separate the two things without harming either, then it's definitely metonymy. But if I say all hands on deck, can you separate hands from a person? Yes, you can. In horror movies, or if you are, performing a surgery, but in that case, will the hand survive? Even if the person survives, the hand will definitely die, and the person will probably die if it's not done by a medical practitioner. So that is an instance of synecdoche. Hello and welcome back to NibblePop. Today in this video we are going to continue with our series on rhetoric, figures of speech, especially under the category of tropes. This is going to be the 5th lesson, and today we are going to cover some very important figures of speech. Some of them might be a little complicated, but I'm sure after watching this video you will be able to identify most of the situations where these figures of speech occur. So we will be talking about hypallage, personification, pathetic fallacy, metonymy, and finally synecdoche, and there are various examples in today's video. So don't skip anything and watch the whole video if you want to get a grip on these figures. This is Monami Mukherjee. Welcome once again. The first figure of speech which we are going to look at today is hypallage, which is also called transferred epithet. Now, before going on to this figure of speech as a whole, let's talk about the word epithet. Epithet means any kind of qualification. Qualification means any qualifying word which can be an adjective, an adverb. Okay, what does an adverb qualify? It qualifies a verb. What does an adjective qualify? It qualifies a noun. So you know all these basic grammar stuff, and I must tell you that you need to have some grip on fundamentals of English grammar if you are to identify especially the figures of speech belonging to the category of tropes. Alright, so now that we have talked about what an epithet is, let's look at what it means when we call it a transferred epithet. Now, take for example this phrase sleepless pillow. Okay, if I say that it was a sleepless pillow on which I spent my night, you will automatically understand that what I mean to say is I wasn't able to sleep. Alright, but what I'm saying is, so far as the structure of this sentence is concerned, the pillow is sleepless, okay, but a pillow cannot be sleepless. Here, what is actually intended is that the adjective is transferred from its actual position, that is sleepless me or sleepless person, to the pillow. So it's a transferring of adjective or epithet. So it is an instance of hypallage. Now, the pronunciation of hypallage is also hypallage. It's alright if you pronounce it in either way so far as you get the spelling correct. Now let's look at some of the examples from literary texts. Alright, this is T.S. Eliot's Wasteland, okay, The Wasteland. Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dried tubers. Now here it is evident that forgetful snow means people who are forgetful in this world, who are indifferent, who do not remember what has happened to them or what they have done, and they move on. So somehow this idea of a snow being forgetful is an instance of transferred epithet. All right, a very classic example comes next. The ploughman homeward plods his weary way. This line is from Gray's Elegy, and when you look at the sentence, where is the adjective? Weary. Weary means tired. Now when you look at the adjective weary or tired, what is the noun that is associated with it? way. Way is an object, okay, road. So a road cannot be tired. Who are tired? People walking on the road. Why? Because they have spent a day of labor, alright. So here we can say that the plowman, okay, he is walking home after a day's work, he is very tired, and the poet is using the expression weary way to actually mean the weary plowman, okay. So the plowman homeward plods his weary way has this hypallage along with two beautiful examples of alliteration, alright. Next, what passing bells for those who die as cattle, only the monstrous anger of the guns. Now when guns are shot or when people fight in the wars, are the weapons angry? No, the soldiers are angry, they are aggressive, the nations are angry at each other, people are angry at each other and they fight. So this epithet angry, this adjective angry is transferred from the soldiers or people or whoever is involved to guns, which is not the real object of this qualifier, alright. So this is a case of transferred epithet. This is from Anthem for Doomed Youth. Now this helps to serve a very subtle purpose. When you look at this line, anger of the guns, and then this phrase, forgetful snow, there is no clear indication of who is the real object of this epithet or this qualifier. In plowman homeward plods his weary way, we have the real subject here, that is the plowman who is weary. But in monstrous anger of the guns, well, we do not have the word soldier or nation or leaders. This is a very subtle way where the poet is avoiding telling us explicitly who is angry. Because see, practically speaking, the soldiers are not angry when they are fighting. They are doing their duty. In plays of Shaw, we have seen that especially in context of the world wars, in case of mercenary soldiers who were hired, they mostly were driven by dread and fear, which is a very natural reaction. So anger is not usually seen in soldiers. Bravery, yes, but anger, no, because they have to be very methodical, disciplined, follow protocols. Anger comes with a lot of chaos and indiscipline, which you cannot have if you are a soldier. So who is angry? The guns sound very angry, but the real trick here is to keep us wondering who is angry, because there is definitely some anger there when there is such a big war. Okay, so this is a way to transfer the adjective to avoid actually pinning one adjective to one object. It's transferred to a different object, a different word, so that we are kept wondering who is forgetful, who is angry. Alright, so that is the idea of transferred epithet. It doesn't always give you the exact person or thing which that adjective usually defines. So how do you identify a hypallage, a transferred epithet? Now, if you know what an adjective is, what an adverb is, it will be easy for you, because you simply have to underline all the adjectives given in the passage which you have in your exam, and then look for the word which that adjective or adverb is qualifying. Suppose there is this word rose and there is this adjective red. No problem there. Thorny rose, no problem there. Happy rose. Well, suddenly you realize that why is the rose happy? Is this poem about a rose? We have to imagine that a rose is a human being. That's a different thing. So maybe the line says that she was holding a happy rose, or he was holding a hopeful rose, which means that he was going to propose to a lady with a rose, and he is hopeful that she'll say yes. And therefore, the adjective hopeful actually should go with him and not with the rose. but here it is transferred to the ruse. So your job is to identify the adjectives, see if they match the words which they qualify. If they match, it is not transferred. If they are not matching with the words which they are qualifying, and rather they are going to match with some other person or thing, then it's a transferred epithet. Alright, I hope you will get it right now. Now let's look at these two sentences. I spent a sleepless night. Well, you have already understood that I was sleepless, the night was not sleepless, so this is transferred epithet. But what if I say, the moon was sleepless and looked at the stars? Here, there is no transferring. We are actually looking at the moon as a person. The moon is sleepless and is doing something, just as if it is a person, a human being. Alright? And this is called personification. Okay? It is also known as prosopopoeia. Spelling is a bit tricky with so many P's and so many O's, but it's very sweet sounding, prosopopoeia. Now, personification is a literary device, if you look at the definition, that refers to the projection, you're expressing projection of human characteristics into some inanimate object in order to create a kind of imagery, a kind of appeals to your imagination. Okay, when you see something which is normally inanimate, act and speak and think like a human being, all right, that becomes personification. You make it a person, all right. But suppose you look at Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, characters which are not human, but they act and speak and talk like humans. Okay, so what is that? Is that personification? No, that is called anthropomorphism, where something is not human but is acting and talking like humans. It is usually seen in case of animation movies or in case of fables, children's stories. There we don't say that it's a kind of personification. Personification is where an object is seen to behave like a person but is not a person. In Disney movies or animation videos, Mickey Mouse is a Mickey Mouse. He is a whole person. Okay, he has a personality of his own. It's a story about him. So this is not where Mickey Mouse is acting like some person. He is acting like Mickey Mouse, who is like a person. Okay, so that is a different, but you won't get an instance of anthropomorphism in your exams. You will most likely get instances where you have to identify personification. Alright, now let's look at some very classic examples. I love this poem. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. Look at the way death is presented. Death is presented as a person who kindly stopped for the poet, and this whole idea is projecting death as a human being with human features. This is from Emily Dickinson's Because I Could Not Stop for Death. Now let me give you an example from Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. Have you watched The Handmaid's Tale? It's a beautiful series. If you have access to the OTT that is showing it, I have just forgotten which OTT, but Handmaid's Tale is a must watch, highly recommended. Anyway, the original novel has this beautiful line, light pours down upon it from the sun. True. So a garden is described here. Okay, a garden where light pours down, and then look at the observation of the narrator. But also heat rises from the flowers themselves. You can feel it, like holding your hand an inch above an arm, a shoulder. It breathes in the warmth, breathing itself in. So what is this it here? The garden. What is the garden doing? The warmth of the garden is filling up the person who is standing there. But this person standing in this garden can almost feel a tangible presence of a human being holding hands, somehow interacting as if it's a person. So this is a personification. Okay, so this is a very beautiful line description of Serena's garden. Now let's look at some examples which maybe you already are familiar with. Shakespeare's sonnet number 18. Here Shakespeare is talking about the heat of summer and how the friend or his beloved is better than summer. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. Whose gold complexion? The gold complexion of sun. His gold complexion dimmed. It's as if the sun has a human face and has a complexion, and when it's cloudy, the complexion is dimmed. All right. So the sun is presented as a person. All right. Now, in the same sonnet, we have this line: "Nor shall death brag, thou wanderest in his shade." So, death is again presented here as a person who is going to boast that his friend is in my territory. So here he's saying that death will not be able to do that. Okay, so death is present as a person, so it's a personification of death. So you see, inanimate objects, abstract ideas, these are usually personified. Autumn, beautifully personified in Keats's poem to Autumn. So he has personified the sun, right? With this expression, you can see the lines here, conspiring with him. So autumn is conspiring with the sun. Now, usually human beings conspire with each other. Like, this is not something which objects do. So this is something which is usually connected with human beings, and therefore we can say that both autumn and sun are personified in this part. We have seen that romantic poets have this tendency of over personification because they feel that the world of nature holds an alternate universe. It's like a parallel universe where things are animated as if they were people. The west wind is an inspiring figure, the skylark is an inspiring figure, and these objects are often seen as even more important than human beings, and therefore often images are used where objects of nature are personified. So in case of romantic poets, you find a lot of examples of personification. All right, see, in case of daffodils, what were the daffodils doing? They were dancing in the breeze. Now, do trees dance? No, human beings dance. Okay, so it's an attribute, a quality which you associate with humans, which you see reflected, or in this case, which is being done by something which is not human. So this is a personification. So how do you identify personifications? What are the tricks? You know what pronouns are, right? He, she, it, they. Look at the pronouns in the passage which is given to you. If needed, underline them. And then see, are these pronouns used correctly? For example, in English language, non-living objects are always denoted, like the singular non-living objects are always denoted with it. Suppose it is a book. But if in any case you find that a non-living object is associated or connected or referred to using the pronoun he or she, automatically that non-living object is seen as a person. Suppose I say, this book knows how much he does not know yet. He is a pronoun. In this sentence, he is connected to the word book, but book is non-living. So the moment I connect he to book, then we understand that this instance is that of a personification. All right. If you take personification a scale higher, where the non-living object does not act like a human being only, but also feels like a human being, then that becomes a pathetic fallacy. Pathetic does not mean bad. Here, pathetic is connected to the word pathos. Pathos means emotions, feelings, something related to how you are sensitive towards something. Okay, so when Arnold says the sea is calm tonight, calm, although it might feel that yes, calm means the waves are not so very fiery, fine, but calmness is something which a person feels inside, peace. So if I say the sea is peaceful, the sea is calm, this is an instance of pathetic fallacy because somehow this feeling is felt by human beings, not by inanimate object like a sea. And therefore, this is a case of pathetic fallacy. Now, you might be a little confused in exams. You have identified an example or an instance of personification, and then you are confused that whether to say it's a pathetic fallacy or not. And if you are in a dilemma, then write personification. You won't be penalized for it. You will be given the marks because it's okay. Like if students cannot identify pathetic fallacy, usually examiners, they forgive. So long as they at least say it's a personification. Okay. I'm giving you some examples of pathetic fallacy where you can understand where the difference is. The difference is pathetic fallacy is talking about personification with the added effect of emotion. For example, even though clouds wept that day, which means it rained. Clouds weeping. So it means you are associating sorrow. Alright. So here, this is an instance of pathetic fallacy. Again, in the sentence, the night is unruly. So, if you can manage to remember this, just point it out as pathetic fallacy. Otherwise, if you say that even the clouds wept that day means personification, it is absolutely okay. It won't be completely wrong. Alright, so you will get your marks there. Now, let's come to two very tricky ones, Metonymy first, synecdoche after that. The word metonymy, it has the word nym, which means name, alright. You can say that when you name one thing for another and there is a connection between the two in real world, then it's called a metonymy, okay. For example, if I say, the pen is mightier than the sword. This line, what does it actually mean? It means that a person who holds the pen has more power, more might than a person who holds the sword. So instead of writing, a writer is mightier than a soldier, we are saying the pen is mightier than the sword. So what we are doing here, we are replacing one word for another. We are replacing writer with pen, we are replacing soldier with sword. Okay. So this is an instance of metonymy. Now metonymy can be seen under like three categories or cases, you can say. It can be, when you use an author's name to refer to all the works written by that author or any one work written by that author. For example, if I say, I'm studying Shakespeare now, okay, what does it mean? Am I studying Shakespeare or am I studying a work by Shakespeare or all the works of Shakespeare? So when you refer to things like he is analyzing Milton, alright, so whenever you use the name of the author to actually mean the works that are written by that author, then it is an instance of metonymy. But if I say I met Dan Brown, well, I can of course meet Dan Brown, okay. But if I say I discovered Dan Brown while studying in my university, this means I haven't met the person, I have read his book. So here I am replacing the word Dan Brown's book with the word Dan Brown himself. Many of us, we use the expressions where we often talk about film directors instead of talking about the name of the film. For example, I love Tarantino or I love Mrinal Sen, where we are actually talking about the films that these people made. Okay, so this is where we are talking about one thing but naming something else. This is called metonymy. Okay, all right. Second way of using metonymy is where you use a sign or a symbol in place of a thing. For example, what is the symbol of kings? The crown, the scepter which they hold in their hands, the throne. Okay, so when you use these words in any expression, you can actually mean the king. All right, look at these lines. Scepter and crown must tumble down and in the dust be equal made with the poor crooked scythe and spade. So when the poet is using the expression scepter and crown, is actually talking about kings. Okay, I am a follower of the cross. Cross is a symbol of Christ, which means I am a Christian or I am a follower of Christ. So this is how we often use expressions where we talk about one thing but name the symbol which is associated with it. Okay. Third way of using a metonymy is what I've already told you. When you are talking about an instrument which a person uses in place of that person's name. In the example which we just discussed, scepter and crown, that one, you notice the last line, with the poor crooked scythe and spade. Here, the scythe and spade are not symbols of anything in general. Just like the crown is a symbol of kings, a spade is not always a symbol of a laborer, but a spade stands for the instruments which a laborer uses, or a daily person who toils, that poor person, he uses these instruments, scythe and spade. So whenever you are using the name of an instrument in place of the person who uses that instrument normally, as in case of pen is mightier than sword, you are using metonymy. All right. Let me give you some more examples to just get it set in your head. Remember this beautiful line from Ode to a Nightingale. Oh, for a draught of vintage. What is Keats talking about? He is talking about some very old wine, some vintage wine which will take him away to the world of imagination. And when he is using the word vintage, he is not saying vintage wine. Vintage means old. So he is using the word vintage to actually mean the real thing, that is the beverage which is old and which is vintage. Okay, so this is an instance of metonymy. Now let's come to a very closely related situation where one thing is named for another, yes, but there is a special quality to it. So you can say it's a special kind of metonymy, and this is called a synecdoche. Now here the writer uses an expression where he talks about the whole thing by naming the part, or talks about the part by naming the whole. Okay, so you can have two kinds of synecdoche: microcosmic synecdoche, macrocosmic synecdoche. Micro synecdoche is where you are naming part of something, but actually you mean the whole thing. For example, instead of writing a man, you are saying hand. Hand is a part of a man. So this is part for whole. And in the reverse situation, where you mention the name of the whole thing to mean part of that thing. The world is getting insensitive to animal abuse. Well, the whole world is not getting insensitive to animal abuse. The human beings who are a part of the world, all right. So there you can say that when you use a larger entity to denote a part or a fragment, then it's using a macrocosmic synecdoche. Okay, so I want you to note down all the categories of synecdoche that are possible. Okay, it can be a situation where a part represents a whole, as I have told you. Let me give you an example. All hands on deck. Okay, what does the poet mean, or what does the writer mean? He means all sailors must come on the deck or the platform of the ship. So here what we have is denoting the word sailor with the word hand. Okay, so part for the whole. Next is when a material represents an object. When we say that I found his name in the papers, it means that I found his name on the newspaper. So when you are actually meaning newspaper but saying paper, it is an instance of synecdoche, because paper is something which is made to make a newspaper. Alright, so it is something which forms the material of the thing which I want to talk about. So this is an instance of synecdoche. Alright, you have heard the expression that I want you to Xerox these documents, or these are Xerox copies. What is Xerox? Xerox is a company, it's a name of a company. It prepares or it manufactures photocopier machines. We actually should be saying, I want photocopies of these documents. Just like Xerox, other manufacturers, they manufacture machines which photocopy, but sadly we say that this Xerox machine belongs to Canon, or this Xerox machine is produced by Canon. So that is just like we say Band-Aid. Okay, his words were a Band-Aid to my wounds. Okay, if I say this. Now what is Band-Aid? It's a medicated adhesive. Okay, it's a bandage, but it's a brand name, and it is so popular that we often use that brand name to denote all kinds of medicated adhesives. Okay, this happens with things like surf in India. Okay, wash this cloth with some surf, and then good night. So there are these very famous brands which completely monopolize our minds, where we don't even realize that they have not monopolized the market. But since maybe they arrived first in the market, so in our subconscious, we have this feeling that this is Band-Aid, even though it might be prepared or manufactured by some different company. Okay. When a whole represents a part, if I say, let's go to the movies. How many movies are we planning to go to? One movie or one film. The whole class is called movies. But we are talking about going to watch one single film. Or if we are that interested, maybe 2, 3, but not all the movies in the world. But we are saying, let's go to the movies. Then this is an instance where we are denoting one thing or two thing or small thing and using the expression which represents the whole category. So it's the reverse of the previous one. Just like in case of Band-Aid representing all the bandages, here movie is representing one movie. So it's a reverse. Okay, so this is also synecdoche. Okay, when you have this kind of line, India won 3 medals in the Olympics. Who won the medals? India or Indians? 3 Indians, 3 players, competitors. Okay. When India wins a match against Pakistan, who is winning it? The cricket team, the football team, or whatever team. So here we are mentioning the whole category to actually talk about one category or one part of that category. So these are roughly the different ways in which synecdoche can be seen. It might look complicated in this way, but trust me, I have seen in my experience that students are able to identify synecdoche, even better than metonymy. In metonymy, there is sometimes a confusion in their mind whether it's a metonymy or a personification or maybe something else, or maybe a metaphor. But in case of synecdoche, people are very much capable of identifying them. Okay, so what are the tricks? Look at the words. Do they represent a brand name somehow? Then of course that is synecdoche. If that is not about that brand name, if somebody says that Johnson and Johnson manufactures Band-Aid, then it's a simple statement. But if I say that you should always put Band-Aid to heal, it might mean that it represents any kind of adhesive. So you have to look for brand names. Then body parts. Is the poet using words like hands and then eyes? And when the poet is using these body parts, is he actually talking about that body part or that whole person? Is that body part doing more than what that should be doing? Is it actually being seen as a replacement of the whole body? Okay, and then whenever you have any material which actually represents the object, the glass was broken, I couldn't see myself. Maybe here I'm actually talking about the mirror, which is made of glass. Okay, when we use the expression, get me a glass of water, even that is synecdoche, isn't it? Because I'm actually looking for a tumbler made of glass where I can have some water. So instead of saying that, I'm simply saying, give me a glass of water. Okay, without realizing that glass is the material which is used to make a tumbler, which is something which we think is a glass. So I have heard this expression, or we often use this expression, give me a steel glass, or I feel better if I drink water from a brass glass or a copper glass. I mean, how can it be a copper glass? It's copper, it's not glass, it's a copper tumbler. Okay, on Amazon you'll have so many copper glasses. So this is so popular an expression, we stop realizing that this is a synecdoche. Okay, alright, so let's look at some real examples from real poems. Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. The western wave was all aflame. When you look at the sea, how many waves do you see? Do you see one wave? No. But the poet is saying the western wave was all aflame. That means he is talking about the whole sea here. But he is using the expression wave. So when you denote the sea with only one wave, it is a part of the whole. So this is synecdoche. More examples. In prayers, we often say, give us this day our daily bread. Do we always mean that I want to eat bread every day? It's okay if I have rice, if I have biryani, if I have fruits, if I have nuts, it's fine so far as I get my nourishment. So bread here is one thing which represents the whole category of food. What I want is nourishment, everyday nourishment, without having to think about it. So here when we say, give us this day our daily bread, we are signifying, like with the word bread, we are signifying the entire spread of things which will help me survive the day. Okay, and taken metaphorically, it might mean something which sustains my soul, something which nourishes my emotions too. So bread is not just bread here, but something more than bread. So this is something more than itself, and it's synecdoche. A very famous line from Julius Caesar, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. Now when a person says lend me your ears, it doesn't only mean that just listen to me with your ears. It means focus. Focus at me, look at me, listen to me, think about what I'm saying. So lend me your ears is not just about hearing through your ears, but paying attention. So it's about lending the whole attention, which involves your ears, your eyes, your thoughts. So this whole idea of a person's attention is expressed through this expression ears. So this is an instance of synecdoche. Now how will you differentiate between synecdoche and metonymy? very closely related to each other. Okay, when you have identified that this can be either a synecdoche or metonymy, okay, you will identify that, I am sure. The confusion will come whether to identify it as a synecdoche or metonymy. Now, a trick which I want you to have in your mind is that, can you separate the two things and not harm the two things or reduce the two things? For example, when I say a pen is mightier than the sword, can you separate a pen from a writer? Well, I am a writer, I write. Where is my pen? I am not holding a pen in my hand right now. Can you separate a soldier from his sword? Of course you can. Can you separate a crown from a king? Every night he sleeps without his crown on his head. So of course you can separate a crown from the king. You can separate a king from his throne. He can go to his washroom every time he wants to. He is a king. Well, so if you can separate the two things without harming either, then it's definitely metonymy. Okay. But when we say it is in the papers, can you take away paper from newspaper? Have you ever tried that? Not possible. Well, again, if I say all hands on deck, can you separate hands from a person? Yes, you can. In horror movies, or if you are, well, performing a surgery, but in that case, will the hand survive? Even if the person survives, the hand will definitely die and the person will probably die if it's not done by a medical practitioner. So that is an instance of synecdoche. So whenever two terms are connected either as metonymy or synecdoche, just try to figure out whether they can be separated and still survive or inseparable. Synecdoche is more intimate connection. Metonymy is loose connection. Now, as I was telling you that you might feel that metonymy is very much like metaphor. You know, pen is mightier than sword. Pen is a metaphor of writer. No, it's not. What does a metaphor do? Metaphor relates to things which are not connected in real life under normal circumstances. As I was telling you that if I compare somebody's hair with the clouds, are they connected in real life? No. Maybe by the overuse of this metaphor down the ages, it might feel that waves are always connected to hair. Stars are always connected to diamonds. But they are not. So when we say that he paid homage to the crown or he paid homage to the throne, and we are actually meaning he paid homage or tribute to the king, then we are talking about one thing with another word, but they are essentially connected in this world because crown is essentially connected to the king. Okay? So, whenever the two things are there, where one thing is used to denote something else, if they are related in real life, it is metonymy. If they are not related in real life, they are metaphors, or it is a metaphor. And if that connection is inseparable, it's synecdoche. It's more in sync with each other, you can say. All right, now our famous exercises. Okay, so I'm giving you this poem, which is again like I wrote it because, well, I had to get all these together here. I want you to pause the video just like you do in all cases. Try to figure out the different figures of speech which we have discussed today in this passage. The window panes of high rises, what do they see in darkest hours? Do they sense the spades and drills that toil to raise the mighty towers? Can the sadness of the soil make them feel less indifferent? Can the sleepless beds reclaim ever the joy of fulfillment? Alright, so your time is up now. First, let me tell you, this poem is about the way in which the rich people get insensitive towards people who toil and labor all day, and yet at the end of the day we find that it is the rich people who do not get peaceful sleep at night. Okay, so when you look at this poem or this passage, the first thing that strikes you is window panes. They are seeing something. Okay, the window panes of high rises, what do they see in darkest hours? So when we get this expression that window panes are seeing something, it means that they are acting like a human being, and this is a personification. All right. Then look at this word, darkest hours. Darkest hours mean, well, the whole night. So we are using the word hours, which means a part of the whole. So this is definitely synecdoche, because you cannot take away hours from time, or you cannot take away time from hour. They are so intimately connected. So this is synecdoche, part for whole. Do they sense the spades and drills? Spades and drills, they are used in place of laborers who use them. So instrument for user. So just like scythe and spade in our example which we have discussed earlier, this is a case of metonymy. Why metonymy? Because at the end of the day, when the laborer goes to his house, he can always put down his instrument, relax, and the connection is there, but it is not inseparable. So this is metonymy and not synecdoche. That toil to raise the mighty towers. Now, who are mighty? Are the towers mighty? Towers are just buildings. How can they be mighty? So the people, the ambitious people who live in those towers, the ambitious people who created those towers, they are mighty. So this is an instance of transferred epithet. Can the sadness of the soil? So the soil is sad. So sad is an emotion. So this is not just personification, but an added thing to it is there, which is pathetic fallacy. Okay. Make them feel less indifferent. So who are going to feel less indifferent? The window panes. So the personification is continuing, but now you are adding emotions to it. Will they feel less indifferent when they hear the sadness of the soil? So here we are having pathetic fallacy again. Can the sleepless beds reclaim ever the joy of fulfillment? So sleepless beds, of course, again we are talking about people who will be spending sleepless nights because they are rich, fine, but they do not have the peace of mind. The laborer, he goes back home. At the end of his day, he is so tired and exhausted, he sleeps all night. But the rich person, well, he's simply staring out of his window pane in a vacant way. We see this expression in Prelude so beautifully by Eliot. So here we see that the beds are sleepless, which means there we have a transfer of adjective. The adjective sleepless should be associated with the people living in these apartments and not the beds. So here it's a case of transferred epithet. Alright, so we are at the end of this video, and again I won't be stretching it far. Next video we will look at irony, paradox, periphrasis, hyperbole, litotes, rhetorical question. And I am collecting all your messages and trying to prepare a 7th lesson based on them. So keep suggesting if you have anything prescribed in your syllabus and I have missed in my lessons so far, suggest to me so that I can add that up in my 7th lesson. Alright, so now that the festive season is still on, I want to wish you all once again a very happy and prosperous Deepavali, because this festival is not just one religious festival for us. This is a metaphor of happiness, of unity, and of love. So till our next video, stay happy, stay safe, keep lighting candles, and keep spreading love. This is Monami Mukherjee signing off. Bye-bye.